And we're back with me, Johnny McMurray, on the On the Spot Football Podcast with another fabulous guest, a big teddy bear at heart, but a hard-hitting centre half. One for the Cliftonville, one for the Larne fans, one for the Carrick, one for everybody probably at some stage. David McAlinden. Davy, how are you, sir?
I'm good, mate. How are you?
I'm very good.
You're looking well anyway. I think all your guests say I do that.
Most of them do, actually. You'd be surprised. It's probably the tan and the flowers.
That's why you have to settle for people like me. Nobody else will come on because you make everybody else look so bad sitting beside you.
Mate, listen, I just want to say thank you for coming on. We have what I would call a really good relationship. Yeah. I'd say to this. We see each other quite regularly. More me torturing you on the phone, text messages, phone calls, getting me stuff, and I apologise for that, but I'm glad that you've agreed to come on, I think.
You probably know I don't really do stuff like this, but when you rang I was like, I suppose I had to do a few.
The only thing is, on Friday I reversed into somebody next door to you.
You did at our work, yeah.
Absolute nightmare to be honest.
I know. Those reversing cameras and the beepers don't obviously work in here.
I mean, I'm waiting for this evidence, to be honest. Your woman did phone me back, actually, but they haven't taken it any further, so good. Touch wood.
Lovely Johnny, as always.
Touch wood. Mate, listen, again, thank you for coming on. Okay. I have a lot of time for you. I grew up at Cliftonville. You were there. You looked after me for around 6 months to a year while I was in pre-season, and then I got to be with you a couple of years after that, but we'll get to that. So what I want to touch on is, who is David McAlinden?
Who is he?
Who is he?
I don't know that answer. From like way back?
From way back. How would you describe yourself as a player?
Just someone who loved to be aggressive in terms of a battle and was honest. That was pretty much it. But I obviously grew up on the Shankill Road till about 11 or 12. Played for the best boys club in Northern Ireland at the time, called St Andrews Boys. They were started by a guy called Joe Kincaid, who was an absolute genius in finding players from all over the place. And they produced so many players. It was incredible. If you look back, there's a whole ream of names that you could go through. People like Steve Davis probably being the top one, Chris Brunt.
David McAlinden.
No, they're not bad. So, and countless Irish League players. So they were considered, and they always won. It used to be a thing called the Champion of Champions, held at Mollusk every year.
I remember.
And St Andrews would have won most age groups every year. There was always one or two clubs at different age groups always competed for that, but St Andrews were obviously the top side. My dad took two of the teams through, who was obviously a massive influence on my early life in terms of football, because he played in the Irish League and considers himself to know everything about football, so I had to listen. So that was sort of the early days, and then whenever St Andrews got so I think we played the 15s and 16s, and then Joe was the Rangers scout.
Okay.
So Rangers then had an affiliation with Linfield. I think they were connected, but anyway, at 16, 17, at 16 you went to Linfield under 16s. So all the teams moved. And I played that 16s year for Stick Thompson, who's a massive figure at Linfield over the years. And at the end of that summer, I went to the Milk Cup to represent County Antrim, who was managed by Joe McCall and Sammy McVicker.
Yeah.
And Joe didn't poach anybody to go to Ballymena, but 7 of us left various boys clubs. We went to Ballymena. Right. We're straight into pretty much straight into the reserves, and that's sort of how the Irish League career kicked off. Ballymena.
When you talk about your dad and his influence on you as a young kid,
yeah,
did you sort of model how you were later in life, probably playing in the Irish League, off your dad, do you think?
No, I don't think so, because I never had real vivid memories of him playing. Earliest memories would have been back in his day, they would have played in what was called summer leagues. So they played in Woodvale Park at the top of the Shankill. They played in summer in Ballymena. I can't remember the name of the place that we'd have played, but it was a summer league, say, and anyone could enter a team, but it was playing for 1,500 quid. 1,500 quid in 1988 was a lot of money or whatever whenever he played. So his team would have consisted of old-time proper Irish League players. So he's friendly with Big Kirk Hunter. He played with Gary Hillis, Nuts Morrison, all them guys, and they were all managed by a guy called Digger Whiteside. And they went regularly to these tournaments and won. And I remember being at one of them and the goalkeeper was playing pool or something after one of the matches, and I was standing behind him and he whacked me with the butt of the pool for by accident. That was so that was like the early memories watching them in the Summer League. I didn't see them too many times in the Irish League, if I'm perfectly honest. I think I have a slight memory of him scoring at Windsor one day for Cliftonville against Linfield. But not really, so it didn't really shape me to who it was. He obviously had a massive influence on the personality that I had. Unfortunately, sometimes the temper that I had. And so he shaped me in that regard, but not from watching him playing. But he did make me taught me good morals in terms of simple, stupid stuff. Like, he would have been getting things ready on a Saturday morning. I've been out cleaning my boots and his boots. Sounds really simple. And he would go, if they weren't done properly. And it was more about just having standards, I think, that he was teaching me rather than him having his boots black. Do you know what I mean? So, he definitely shaped me in that regard, but not from a footballing point of view, I don't think.
Just from a father?
Yeah,
more so.
Just standards and what it should be expected and being at training on time. And as I say, the boots thing is the one thing that I always remember.
When you talk about being at St Andrews, doing well, if they had this culture of winning and then you have to move to Linfield, did that just smoothly transition you into Linfield at that time? Because
that's the way it was then, because there was no academies, so it was all boys clubs. There was Dungoyne, there was Celtic Boys, there was St Andrews, obviously, Lisburn Youth. You heard Gary talking a few weeks ago about Lisburn Youth and St Andrews, the competitiveness of it all. That's the way it was then. The academies or the Irish League clubs only really got involved when you were 16, I think they were allowed then. So the teams went into that. To be honest, our St Andrews team was never the most successful. We didn't really produce players out of that team.
We just didn't live up to the standard.
We just weren't as good as the rest of them. Like the team before won everything. They had people like Ram McCann played in that team, and they were really, really good. I think 3 or 4 of them signed for Wolves or something. We had a guy, Ricky McAlinden, signed for Rangers. Didn't do it there. Never played when he came home, really. And never had a career in football. So we never really had anyone, to be honest.
Was there ever the option for you to go
to
anywhere?
Yeah. At a trial at Rangers, I was a centre forward back in them days. Scored 2 on the trial, but I was never blessed with pace, so I was never going anywhere. Whenever we went to Ballymena and it broke into the Ballymena first team, John Gregg was there. Greggy, who's now at Korean.
Yeah.
And he was playing in a reserve game. I think it was the Saturday before I made my debut for Ballymena. But Greggy's dad obviously is Harry Gregg.
Yeah.
And he had massive connections in England around Manchester and Burnley and blah, blah, blah. So over a certain amount of time, then a bit of interest came from Burnley, and me and my dad flew to a Manchester United game. They were playing Bayern Munich in the Champions League game, and that was arranged by an agent called Scott McGarvey, and they wanted me to sign for Burnley. Right. Stupidly, say stupidly, everything happens for a reason. So they wanted me to sign, but me and my dad decided it would be a better idea to finish off my A-levels and ensure things will maybe still be there, keep progressing in the Irish League, but obviously that never materialised.
Is it something that you look back on thinking, I could have went away and had a better option or a better opportunity?
You always wonder, don't you? But you always wonder what you couldn't have had. Then if you'd have made them choices, do you have, the life that you have now in terms of family and stuff like that? So like you choose your path, and that's just the way it is. And I was could have signed for Ross County when I was after the Milk Cup. About 4 or 5 of us went away to Ross County, and we were all offered deals, and 2 or 3 of us didn't take them, and 2 did, and I don't think they ever really done anything either. A big lad called Sean Webb might have played for like the 21s and stuff. So it was another little opportunity, and it just never worked out. So I think I was doing well at Ballymena at the time. It broke through, and I was enjoying being here and seeing how that Irish League progressed, because I'd always grew up going to Linfield games, being from Mashakal, and I don't know. Thinking back, I can't remember, but vividly. But I must have seen myself in that Irish League. Let's see, have a go at this, and then see where it takes you.
So you make that move to Ballymena. Joe takes you along. You're straight in, near enough straight into the first team. You play a wee bit of reserve football. You're now almost ready to go. And you said there that you were a centre forward.
No, well, I was centre forward, but I was like 11, 12. But by that time,
I was 10 years later. You were playing reserves.
I was that slow that I remember Harry McKee, who would have been our St Andrews manager. He was like, moving back into centre midfield, because he was all right on the ball. He could pass it and whatever. And then suddenly he was discovered that he can't move around in there. So we'll move him back another one. So he ended up at centre half, and
one step away from goal.
Things were in front of me, so I felt a wee bit more comfortable. So by the time I'd got to the Milk Cup stage, I went to the Milk Cup with Joe and came back to sign for Ballymena after that. Then I was centre half, maybe probably playing centre half for 3 or 4 years at that stage, maybe.
Did you want the transition back, or did you just know that, like, I just can't do this as a kid and I need to be a centre half?
Nah, weirdly, people always think they know you, don't you, without really knowing you. So I think the idea is that he's this big ugly centre half who just goes and heads it and kicks it, where I actually prefer the other side of the game, being open, going and attacking. You probably remember this from Lauren,
right?
Like
from defence,
going scoring
most of the time.
No, not at all. You were never a winger. Anyway,
we'll get that.
So yeah, so I was always more interested in, like, us boys I played with, always moaning about taking free kicks and penalties, like talking to the corner takers about where I was going to be in the box. Like, I can head it in. So I was always obsessed with scoring goals. So no, I never really wanted to go back, but I suppose my skill set decided that I was better as a centre half and maybe chip in with the odd goal rather than being this big centre forward.
So you make your debut at Ballymena. What's that change room like as a young kid, going into that as your first experience?
Well, I as I said, grew up going to watch Linfield, and at that stage Linfield had people like Jeff Spears, who we'll probably get on to later. Jason Allen was playing centre half. Around the league, you had people like Jerry Flynn was in that changing room, Barry Tumulty, Glenn Hunter, who had played for Linfield, he was a good centre forward. Mark Carlisle, who had played a million games for Ballymena. Nigel Boyd on the other side. So you're walking in, suddenly I was this kid who was walking into a changing room full of absolute grown men, as simple as that sounds. And I remember Nigel Best was the manager at the time. And we had about 3 of us, myself, Tony Anderson, and I can't remember who the other one would have been, but 2 or 3 of us would have started to train with the first team, and then we were invited into the first team changing room to start getting changed, trainings and whatever. So suddenly you're sitting beside all these boys. Big John McDowell's another one who was a forward, was meant to sign for Rangers, ended up being a centre half, absolute legend in Ballymena. And so it was daunting. It was, Nigel got the sack and Kenny had been brought in, but during that time I was playing for Northern Ireland schools, 17 under 18s, and we went to Australia for 3 weeks on like a tour to play against. We went there for 10 days to acclimatise, see the place, and then
that's a great trip for whoever.
We went to Andy McMorrin was the manager with Bob Ramsey.
Right, okay, get your school. Nice. Schools.
So
they were definitely on the drink.
Probably. And the next, then went to Australian Institute of Sport in Canberra. And we were playing against Wales, Australia, and New Zealand.
Yeah. And
it was a brilliant trip. But by that, whenever we came back then, that was over New Year. So we went on like 27th of December, I think we flew, and came back sometime in January. whatever it was. But Kenny then had been in place then. I think he took over at the start of January. So when we came back, Nigel was gone. I never played for Nigel, but he had brought me sort of into the first team squad and started to share and train with those guys. And then Kenny had sort of, I don't know if there was a window then, but anyway, it started to get sort of, people moved out and we were sort of getting closer to the first team. And then he had brought myself in, played against Portadown, I think was the first game. And then it was sort of in and out of the team the rest of the season, but we got relegated that season. I remember one of the games, Tim Dalton was the goalkeeper. He used to play for Portadown, but Timmy was always very particular and polite, and like his boots were gleaming, and there'd no muck on him ever for being a goalkeeper. He was just gleaming, and his hair was slicked back, and he was just gorgeous.
Just a gorgeous man.
And he was nuts, and first sort of experience of being in a proper change room. And I spoke about Big John, who was like real pitbull of a man, and crossman there from post, playing up against Peter Whitnell, Crusaders, never forget it. And Dalton's called, like goalies or whatever, he shouted, and I could have headed it away, and I've sort of like shied out thinking Timmy's coming to get the ball, but Whitnell's just there and just off my shoulder, and he's glanced it into the net, and I think it would be 3-1 that day. And Big John went absolutely ballistic at half time or full time, whatever it was. And obviously my argument was like, Timmy's called it. It's his responsibility. And he taught me that day that it was not Timmy's responsibility. And me and him were like arguing fiercely, head to head. And I can remember myself being so angry and frustrated that but it was just like a welcome scenario to, you just do what you're told by the senior players and get on with it. And me and Big John got on the best even today. But it was a real learning curve. One of many at Ballymena, to be honest. It was a real good ground and some proper good footballers. Training was a different level than I knew altogether. It was fiercely competitive, and it was something that I really, really enjoyed. And I went from probably feeling like I have good stuff. Big Paul Trainer, who you'll know, Big Chew, who later got involved with Cliftonville, but he was never Cliftonville reserves at the time when I was at Ballymena. So I was in the first team and then out and whatever during that relegation season. And so you think you've made it a wee bit, don't you, when you start to break into the first team. And it was playing a reserve game on a Tuesday night on the showgrounds, and we're playing against Cliftonville, and I've come out socks up over the knees and boots polished and tape round everywhere it should be, and thought I could get it down and play. And you know, I'm a first team player nearly, and after about 4 minutes, Big Chew absolutely hit me like a steam train, and he's kicked me from one end of the showgrounds to the other for 95 minutes. And it was, I've said this to him before, it was probably the best education that I got, and it was those two spring to mind from Ballymena, that it was like, this is the Irish League you're in now. You're not some footballer who thinks they can play a little bit. You got to get down into the dirty side. And it taught me real good lessons, especially at a young age, 16, 17. And yeah, it was a brilliant grounding for me.
I think that the way you're speaking about that was, especially whenever I came through, and I came through with you pretty much, because you were part of the reserves when we were all coming in.
Yeah.
With Michael Press, who was the manager at the time. And at that time, you still had a first team. Your reserve team was a first team. And most weeks, there was 7, 8, 9, plus the 2 reserve players who was pretty much on the fringes. And that got you ready.
It did.
And I'm actually afraid, and I spoke about this with Guy a couple weeks ago, that's no longer even close.
No, and it's Gary's fault.
Right.
Because,
and
I'll tell you why, because, and it was brilliant from him, because what he did when he was Glenavon manager, he brought all the youngsters into the reserves and then played them all against all these men. So it was Gary started that, if you remember back, and so it's actually his fault that he's destroyed that. But then everyone thought, oh, Gary's producing loads of players. Like, they all started coming through, didn't they?
Yeah.
Like Sykes and Singleton and Marshall and whatever else, and I'm sure there was more. But then everyone was like, what are they doing there? Oh, Gary's putting the youngsters in at 16, 15.
13.
To play in the reserves. And suddenly then the reserves became the under-18 team, or under-18 league, and lost its, what you just said, it lost its, like, education side.
Competitiveness too. It's like, if you're a first teamer and you drop down now, which unfortunately I had to do quite a few times there, but you don't care, and you don't get the same out of it as what you did 8-9 years ago, because the actual gameplay isn't as fast, and you're playing against kids who aren't technically at that level, and it's not as competitive. People don't go around tackling each other. You're not worried about really anything. You just go, you turn up, you're going to get more out of a training session.
Yeah.
And then you're like, I have to go do this on a Monday night with all these kids. And it's more of a put off now, whereas when you're a kid and you're getting in the reserves, you were buzzing. You were like, wonder what first teamers are doing tonight. Yeah. And then you're like, Jonty, Cats, all these people. And
plus you had the 3 or 4 who were like seasoned second team players who were older.
Yeah.
Like Paul Traynor finished at Cliftonville at the time. But you had older players that were, the 3 or the 4 of them always played in the reserves and made them strong and aggressive, you know. So you always knew that they were playing as well.
Yeah.
And if you broke 1 or 2, my argument is, I don't know whether this, maybe no one agrees with this, but I think now that the league should actually introduce that you have to, instead of having like, you know, they have the rule about it's under 20s now.
Yeah.
But it's like an under 18s league.
Yeah.
So what's the point in having it? So make sure that 5-year players are over 25. Because we don't have the massive pool of players where we can say 10 of them have to be under 20 or under 19 or whatever. I don't know what the rule is. Throughout the 12 Premier League clubs, the pool isn't there. So put 3 or 4 or 5 who have to be over 25, who are good club men, the way that it used to be, to produce better younger players. Oh, yeah. And again, I'm not saying it's an exact science in terms of the numbers, but there has to be something to take away from the fact that it's nearly a useless exercise now. In a lot of regard.
The big thing in England, do it and they implicate ex-players.
You'll see Tom Huddleston was the manager.
Well, Sure was doing it before he had to do it, and he was playing in midfield and teaching kids around him and like that. It's the fact that then kids are able to learn off somebody at that level is going to give them more insight to the game than anything.
Well, that just told you what my biggest education was. A 38-year-old man absolutely schooling me for 95 minutes and saying this is what this place is all about, because I've been around and I know what it's about. And I took more from that than I would have done if I'd have played for the under-18s for 3 years.
Yeah.
Do you know, it's just brilliant development. And there, as I say, I don't know the exact science to it in terms of what it should be and what it shouldn't be, but there needs to be definitely a revamp or relook at it, because Gary spoiled it all.
Guy ruined it. Guy Hamilton killed the Irish League's reserves.
Don't mean that up. Obviously, he was ahead of everybody else, is what I mean. And it worked when he done it for them because everyone else was playing older players, so they got the benefit. But when everyone else started doing it, it was just a glorified under-18 team.
So just to bring you back in, I wanna go back to where you were at Ballymena. You talk about getting into the team. What was that time like for you overall? Did you enjoy it?
It was good, obviously. Yeah, you always. I'd been an Irish League kid, if you like, so I grew up playing and watching Linfield, and wanted to be out there someday. So to play in the Irish League was obviously something that I always dreamt of doing. So Ballymena giving me that opportunity, Kenny giving me that opportunity, was something that I really appreciated and something that I never took for granted and wanted to make it work. So, but it was strange in a way because Kenny had obviously taken over and he'd lost a few players. He was introducing some kids that year, even though the club looked like they were getting relegated and subsequently did get relegated. Then lost a whole raft of players. And I think we had, like, me and Albert Watson were playing a period at centre half, and I was like 17, he was 16.
That's horrible. You two probably looked like 40-year-olds at that age.
Yeah. So Kenny went really young, coupled with, like, Mark Carlyle was still around, Boydie was still around, John Madole was still been there, but he had lost. Skin Littles of the world had gone. Jerry had gone. Barry Tumulty he got rid of. Glenn Hunter had went. All the season pros, the big hitters, if you like. I don't know if Ballymena at the time had cut the budget or what had happened, but we got relegated in Ballymena. It was probably a low time in their history, but it was great for me because I was playing senior football very, very quickly.
Yeah.
And seemingly doing okay. And then Kenny the following year in the championship tried to get back up again, and he brought in like a couple of older players, which meant then I suffered a little bit and was found my way out of the team, and it was just that development stuff. And I'd probably got ahead of myself thinking I want to play all the time and all the time, all the time. And we got to the semi-final of the County Antrim Shield, I think. And I remember going to Kenny a few weeks previous saying I'm not playing enough, I want to leave. And he tried to talk me out of it or whatever, but I ended up on the Crusaders. And in hindsight, I shouldn't have been as hasty, and because I would have loved to have developed under Kenny for another couple of seasons to see what that would have done for me. But he wrote me a lovely letter on the saying, you know, you should have been here as part of the squad, I wish you well, and blah blah blah. And I always think back to that really fondly, and he didn't have to do something like that. And
so you go to a Cruise. How much different is Crusaders to Ballymena? Did you think that the grass was going to be greener?
Well, they were in the Premier League at the time, so it was like my way of getting back into the Premier League. I spoke to Alan Dornan. He was someone that had watched growing up, would have been my dad's era. And when I went into the changing room, he built me up to be like, you know, he's going to make a real difference and blah, blah, blah. So, but just never materialised, never got going. But I did walk into the changing room, like, yes, mentioned him earlier, Jeff Spears was the captain. An absolute colossal of a man, like proper centre half. Gavin Arthur would have been there. And there was other good pros at the time, Johnny Shaw. So it was a decent side, but they weren't brilliant either. Coachy was coming through at the time. Chris Morrow, was coming through as well. So there was a couple of younger ones knocking around, but I just never got going. I think it was always in the back of my head that I'd built up a bit of rapport with Ballymena. I'd been hasty and jumping early, and it didn't really happen. But it did score the winner on Boxing Day,
right,
against Cliftonville, which is probably the highlight and probably one of the only good things that Crusaders fans would ever say about it. I can't work out. I always laugh about this. My dad's really friendly with Kirk Hunter. I always think to myself, I wonder if they disliked me more when I played for them because it wasn't great, or when I was at Cliftonville. I can't work it out. But no, as I say, even sharing a changing room with Big Jeff Spearsy was outstanding. Again, a man of proper presence. I remember one day we were going out to play, I think it was against Linfield, but it must have been like March or April, and the grass, there was no grass on it, CV, it was just like as hard as an absolute rock. And I came out, and me and him was playing centre half, and I came out, and Spearsy always done his own warm up. He came over to me and was like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "Warming up." He said, "What have you got on your feet?" I said, "Football boots." And he goes, "No, but they're moldies." I was like, "Yeah." I said, "Jeff, it's hard as a rock." He goes, "You're not wearing moldies going to war with me." I said, "I dead on." So I jogged across the pitch, and he came after me and said, "Go in and change your boots now." And he made me go in. I went in like a wee boy, changed them into studs, and played on this mad surface with studs on. But that I respected him that much, and I grew up watching him, and he was a proper warrior. I mean, like, I remember he had a hernia, and he should never have been playing, but he used to use this big band to like hold his hernia in so he could play through the game. And then he was like 9.5 out of 10 every week. He was the only real player. We just harboured on him.
See, that's the thing. I spent a bit of time at Cruise, and to be fair, I actually got along quite well with Spearsy, but it was because we clashed that much. I think that he liked it. He was like, he's not going to step down from me. And anytime he said something or I said something, it was like,
oh, did you?
Close. And then he would always be really sweet with you.
Yeah.
He never held a grudge with me. if that makes sense. But I always heard stories about what he was like as a player. But
warrior, man.
when you meet him, you're kind of like, you get it. Because the way he was as an assistant and the way he spoke and he went about things, you're kind of like, you obviously were mental.
Well, so whenever I walked in that change room, I obviously looked up to him massively, because he was like, he'd been at Linfield when I was growing up, and I'm like, I'd seen him scoring goals. You know, you're almost like, this is sort of what I want to turn into. And I remember every Thursday night, me and him used to go into the bar after training and have like 2 packets of crisps each and a bottle of the Gazette. And then thinking back, I'm going, there's no wonder I didn't play well back then. So yeah, but listen, it didn't turn out probably the way I would have wanted it to, and it wasn't, in hindsight, it wasn't a great move, but it was what it was.
So Cruz finishes, you played, I think, around 19, 20 games. Like you say, you scored 1 goal, which is probably the biggest goal.
Was that the only goal?
I think it was 1 goal that.
Yeah.
1 goal that mattered.
Yeah, I also gave a penalty away that day as well, which Michael Doherty saved, so we'll not talk about that.
You go to Glenavon.
Yeah.
What was that like?
Tommy Kincaid was the manager at the time, and he knew that I wasn't happy. He'd chipped at me a couple of times to maybe come down, because he knew that I wasn't playing at Crusaders as much as I would have liked. But I was like, I was young, and I was suddenly, this was going to be my 3rd club. Like, got to stick somewhere. But then I wasn't playing at all, really. Things weren't good at Crusaders at the time. Dorney was struggling with the squad was struggling with him. And it was getting a little bit toxic, and I thought, this isn't good here. So went and spoke to Tommy, and despite having then, I was dropping down into the championship again, which I probably realised at that stage was maybe a better thing, because I would get more games and play and whatever else, and that's what it transpired into. And we had a decent side. We weren't brilliant by any means. Tommy had this little group of players that sort of followed him around from a couple of different clubs, and he had them there. And he had people like Pete Beattie and stuff as well. So yeah, it was decent. And then obviously at the end of that first season, Alan Dornan got the sack and Stephen Baxter taking over at Crusaders.
Yeah.
I think that was the same year, and we met them in the playoff. And so obviously, taking into consideration, I knew who Jeff Spears was.
Yeah.
And would shirt all in, look, it's the guy. And he'd been telling me stories and blah, blah, blah. So we played at Mornview the first game, and I played centre half, and had a bit of wasn't brilliant from memory. And I think it was like a Friday, Tuesday, or a Tuesday, Friday maybe. So we played on the Tuesday. I think we'd drawn 1 each or something. But we're going to Seaview with a draw. And I remember Kincaid coming to me on the Thursday night and saying, have a word. Right, here we go. Know what's coming here. And he said, listen, we know Big Spears is a bit of a unit, and we play too many ball into him, and he just kept hemming us in because he won every header. What do you think about playing centre forward? I'm like, and days going by, I've been thinking, I'll have a bit of this, but all I could think about was Big Jeff just running them steel studs down the back of my calf and like kneeing me in the back every time he got a chance. So, of course, I just said whatever, anything to help the team. So, played centre forward, and we ended up winning 1-0 and got promoted that night. And the Cruise went down, and obviously they bounced back really well. That's that.
What was that battle like that night? And let's not scave away from.
I don't remember too much about it. It was probably concussed.
Because I was it's probably elbowed.
Yeah,
elbows everywhere, punches.
Yeah, I think. Listen, it was probably a battle. As I said, genuinely can't remember too much about it, and yeah, I must have done okay because we ended up getting the goal, even though I didn't. But yeah, it was a good experience, and again, it was one of them things that you hope is an invaluable experience to turn you into some sort of, you were hoping that it was going to make you a better player.
See, when you have to consider dropping the league, does your dad help you make that decision, or is that solely your decision?
No, I would have always spoke to him about things like that, but he ultimately wanted me to make the choice, and I did that, and sometimes it was right and sometimes it was wrong. But yeah, anything in relation to that, I would have always had the conversation with him.
Is your promotion there at Glenavon your first trophy?
That wasn't really a trophy, was it?
Well, it's kind of like winning the league, isn't it?
It was probably my first achievement. I wouldn't have said it was a
Try
trophy, but the only trophy that I ever win was the County Antrim Shield with the Reds. Beat the Whites in the final, 2-1. Marky Holland scored 2.
Good night.
It was good.
Sure
It was good, and it sort of whetted the appetite for nothing came next. But
so at this
You were
stage,
off there,
you have 3 clubs.
yeah,
What age are you?
I don't know. Can't remember when that was. Genuinely, my memory's awful. So forgive me.
Quite young though, you would be, because
I was young, yeah, because I think it was captain at Glenavon. Tommy got the sack the following year, I think.
After being promoted?
Brown came in. Yeah, I think we really struggled at one stage, and then Jimmy Brown came in. And yeah, I can't piece together how long I would have been at Glenavon. But Jimmy Brown came in anyway. Tommy was gone. And when Browner came in, he made me captain. I think Big Pete then was his assistant. Pete Beatty. So it must have been maybe 2 years. Again, I can't remember exactly. But yeah, I was young. I think it was about 22.
3 clubs, 22.
I know.
Jeez.
I know, it wasn't good. But then, obviously, I ended up at Glenavon, and we were a decent side. Whenever Jimmy was actually the manager, I think I beat Portadown around Christmas time. It might have been Boxing Day, or we drew with them maybe. But I think we went. I think if my memory's right, we went top of the league.
Right.
Around Christmas time. Mightn't have been the Portadown game. It might have been one of them games around Christmas time, and I don't think so. We're say top of the league for about 5 minutes, because we never win another game, I don't think, till the last game of the season, which kept us in the league. How does that happen?
He's ready to win the league, and then
Well, we were never going to be good enough to win the league, but we'd done rightly under him for the first half of the season. And I genuinely don't believe that we win another game until we beat, I think it was Limavady.
Football's a strange game when you consider
Limavady on the last day of the season.
how quickly the wheels can fall off.
And we stayed up. And then after that, I'd signed another contract. Jimmy brought me in. Obviously, he had made me captain when we came in. He gave me a new contract, and off I went on holiday. And when I was on holiday, I got a phone call to say Jimmy's been sacked. Or Jimmy might have actually rang me.
Phone you that, yeah.
But they'd done all the end of season things, awards dinners, and the board had said Jimmy's here to stay. The first part of the season was good, blah blah blah. Done all that, and then so because Cliftonville's shown an interest in me at that stage, and I was like, no, Jimmy's, I'm staying loyal. Well, I had 3 clubs. Can't keep moving. So
on their 4 iron,
stayed loyal to Jimmy, and then when I went on holiday, I got a phone call from him. I think it was him to say, "Here, listen, I've just got sacked a club of," and they appointed Colin Malone. That stage, yeah.
Were you wanting? Well, probably not to say were you wanting to go. Were you thinking that you should have just jumped ship and went?
At that stage, it turned down a better move because we had just escaped relegation.
Yeah.
And I was like, what sort of situation am I left in now?
Yeah.
I didn't know Colin Malone at that stage. And so I didn't know. I was up in the air, and as I said, I was on holiday, so I didn't know what to expect. And when I came back, I just reported for pre-season.
And everything just continued on as normal?
No. Collie suddenly made it clear that I wasn't his type of centre half, and as quick as he could get me out the door, then that would happen. And I had no qualms about that. That was his call, and I just trained as hard as I could at that stage, hoping and cursing myself at the same time that I've turned a decent move down here, I think. And then there was another couple of little rumours about different clubs and transpired that Cliftonville was still interested.
This is where obviously things become more regular for you.
Yeah.
You make your move to Cliftonville.
I'd sort of done that at Glenavon that year too. I'd sort of become more of a reliable, if you want, I suppose I'd earned my stripes in that sort of company where you're playing against good Irish League centre forwards, and you were showing more often than not that you were belonging in that company, if you like. And so at that stage, it sort of earned those stripes, and at Cliftonville, as you say, then it became more regular.
Who contacted you at Cliftonville?
So when I was at Glenavon, come back to Big Chew, right? So Big Chew was always dead calm on the sideline, wasn't he? As was Eddie. And so I'm playing this day at Mornview. So the changing rooms are obviously that little hut at the top. You know where I'm talking about?
Yeah.
And the away team, or the further away dugout. So we were defending that side. Nathan McConnell was playing centre forward for the Reds, never forget it. And at some stage in the game, obviously I enjoyed the physical aspect of the game. So I was on top of Nathan a lot of the time, and they were getting a bit angry about how I was treating them or whatever, and maybe I was being over physical, I don't know. But they were going bonkers. I must have done something, and they weren't happy about it. And then a ball dropped between me and him right in front of their dugout, and I absolutely smashed through it, and all hell broke loose, and Eddie got sent off at the top of the steps. So I think it was the first half, because when we got there, I was like standing at the top of the steps, and obviously waiting for me, so which I had no problem with. So there was a little bit of a kerfuffle, and then when he phoned me, then I was like, this is a bit weird, because like the last time I spoke to you, or
No, I sent off.
trying to punch each other, I have to be honest. So yeah, it was him, and he set up a meeting with himself and Jared Lawler, who was like, I don't know what he called himself back then, director of football or
everything. He was the guy.
Yeah, he was the man, and he was the one doing the negotiations. I can't remember. Jared used to work in McHugh's, I think you remember, and I drove down the street, a one-way street, the wrong way, and the cops pulled in at the same time. That's how I remember where it was. It was actually McHugh's, and because I drove in the wrong way, and the cops pulled me over, and I was like, the girl cop, she was like, you know, you're riding down the street the wrong way. I'm like, I do. I'm sorry, but I'm trying to find somewhere to park. Had to explain to her why I was there, and she let me off, thankfully.
Right.
But so it would have been them that contacted me, and they were still interested. And yeah, we got the deal done for 2 years.
So, gonna pause it there, right?
Yeah.
Overall picture, you're a young lad, you grew up in the Shankill. You went to St Andrews, big Linfield fan, went to the games, played for Linfield. Your dad plays for Cliftonville. Is it like a thing where you always wanted to play for Linfield? And was there any animosity with you signing for the Reds, being from where you were?
Did I want to play for Linfield when I was younger? Yes, absolutely. They were the boyhood club that I went and followed every week. Didn't matter where it was. If I could make their game on a Saturday, I would have made it. So yes, I wanted to play for Linfield growing up. Problem is that Linfield never wanted me. Apart from one occasion where me and David spoke briefly. Very, very briefly. And as I said to him at the time, and it was like it wasn't like we want you to come and sign for Linfield. It was more of a, what do you think of this type scenario. So, but the problem was Linfield had Noel Bailey, who was incredible, and Big Winky. Like, I was never better than them.
Yeah.
So I was never playing. And they also had Andy Hunter in the reserves, who's the most capped reserve player in the world because of the two centre halves that he was playing behind.
Yeah.
Do you know, so, and he was a great centre half. So I was like, there's no point in going there. Winky's never retiring, which proved right. Noel's never retiring, which proved right. So it was just set of circumstances, and so they were never really interested, properly interested. you know what it's like. People talk and
Yeah.
talk around different things, but Cliftonville were properly interested. And whenever I met them, and they had plans and they had a good side, you know, I remember. But I remember saying to Eddie, like, "Sure, you want to sign me?" And he was like, "Why?" I said, "You just signed Daggy O'Hara as well. We'll be the slowest centre halves in Irish League history." And he was like, "Just leave that to me." And he was right. To be fair to him, me and him never always get on, and we had our ding dongs. But he was right about that, because we formed a decent partnership, and I think we rivaled Linfield and were better on them on certain seasons that we'd conceded less. So yeah, he must have seen something that he thought it would work, and it did.
Did you quickly come into that Cliftonville bubble? I keep talking about this weird own town. Cliftonville's like its own place.
Yeah.
How quickly did you realise that you were solely for Cliftonville?
People ask me this question, and my answer is always pretty much the same. If you ever see any of the old zombie films, and a zombie bites someone on the shoulder, and suddenly they're thinking the same way.
Yeah.
That's the way it was. It was like they'd created this siege mentality within the club. Listen, rightly or wrong, whatever how it's regarded outside, it didn't matter, because once you were in there, and I was the type of character that was like, I wanted to win football matches. I wanted to try and be as successful as I possibly could. If I had to buy into this, that was easy to buy into and become like, it's us against everybody else. Siege mentality. It probably suited me at that stage to go, this is right up my street here. Because we were physical, we looked after each other, we socialised together. I hear a lot of old players saying that, but we were this real strong group who were just looking out for each other first, and then there was a football pitch, and that's the way it was. And we had some brilliant seasons when I was there, and we probably just underachieved. I think we underachieved. We beat Larne on a Tuesday or a Friday night to go top of the league with like 6 games to go, and I don't think we win another match. The pressure of it, maybe, I don't know who was. Everyone was responsible that we just didn't go on and do it, but there was definitely, the seeds were sown for them to have a successful time.
You're there at the time where you start to see probably this new core of players coming in. So obviously me coming in, these players are seasoned. The likes of your George McMullen, who was the captain.
Yeah.
John D, Katz, the Skinnells. That was like Cliftonville kind of moving forward with this new core group of people.
Yeah.
What was it like playing with those people?
It was incredible, because they were such a talented bunch who weirdly people didn't the way we looked at it was people undervalued them and underestimated how good they were. I mean, George McMullen could have signed for anyone in the Irish League any summer and quadrupled his wages.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about that in my mind. I know that for a fact. You'd Ronan Skinnell, who was
A Rolls Royce, wasn't
I
he?
don't care what anyone says, was the best left back. You're probably going to argue about Mark Glendenning as well, but Ronan was just going forward and defensively. I always said to him, I played on the left because Daggy couldn't kick it to his right, never mind his left. So I had to play on the left side as a centre half. And I always said to Ronan, like, I was slow, and Ronan wasn't daft, school teacher and all that. Yeah. So I was like, you better be over my shoulder. So if anything goes over my head, I need you to be here. And he always used to just laugh. And he'd be playing left wing, and I'd be golden at him, not tell you what I said, get back. And then 5 seconds later, the ball would be switched over my head, and I'm thinking, I'm in trouble here because Ronan's playing left wing. And he'd be behind me heading it back to John Connolly. And I'm thinking,
where'd you come from?
Hi. But he was such a good footballer.
I always remember getting into the squad at that stage very young. I think it was 17 when I started training with the first team, and the mentality was still there. You still see that thing. And I remember I always sat beside Eamon Sidak, and Ronan was there. And not at one time did I ever think that those two were like footballers. like if you looked at them, you'd go, there's no way. And he just casually played consistently at that level every week. And I just couldn't get it because I was like, he was never physically built.
No.
And he was just so smart about playing football in that position.
Everyone thought he was left-footed.
I know, that was the maddest thing ever. And he had that wee curled ball up the line and he perfected it. And I'm sitting going like, what is going on?
I just don't think he really, I wouldn't say he didn't care, he did. And the thing about all that squad of players is everyone, you bump into, the boys now or whatever, they just loved playing in that team. I don't know what it was, whether it was that mentality I talked about, but they just loved being a part of that group. And it was, but a lot of clubs were like that then too. Heard Gary talking about Glenavon at the time. Linfield had this massive mentality. Heard Sturdy King talking about it with you, where there was like that band of brothers type thing. And it was a different way then. I don't want to harp on about what the rest of the lads have said, but you did socialise together. You did go for a beer after. You can't live in each other's pockets, but you were really, really, really close. And I'm not sure that that's the way it is now. And for me, that's a negative. So we had that at the Reds.
Yeah.
No doubt about that. But what we also had was really, really good footballers. Like Conor Downey and Katz Janty, Georgie on one side. I mean, John O'Loughlin was a decent footballer, ran all day long. Chris Scannell, who was undervalued as anything. Like, what a player.
I've never seen a guy teach me how to use my body more.
Incredible.
And anytime the ball went into him, it was like, I can't do that, Chris. Like,
he made us look brilliant.
Sucked the ball in.
He made us look brilliant. Mental. I remember going back a second time, Dermot O'Carroll was playing centre forward, and I just hit a ball that I would have hit the Chris Scannell, which was probably deeper than Dermot wanted it because he wanted everything in the feet. And I said to him, fucking get after the ball. And he just said to me, not to do, know your players. And I was thinking, he's not Chris Scannell. So, and Dermot had loads of qualities, but he had different qualities.
Yeah.
But Chris just made certain things that you did as a centre half, knocking balls forward.
He got something out of it for you.
Like, he was such a dream. And it sounds weird to people because you go, what's he talking about a centre forward for? He was a centre half.
Yeah.
But if we'd have hit diagonals, which we did often, that's the way the game was then. It's a little bit longer and, we could play into George or we could play into Downey or whatever. But if you needed a way out, then Scannell would win you free kicks, throw-ins high up the pitch just by smashing it long. Forwards changed when you came along.
Yeah, well, I still done that. Just at a very lesser level.
No, he was the team was good. I mean, Ronan, Liam Fleming was obviously right back. Me and Decky, John Connolly was a good goalkeeper. So, and then not even to mention the likes of Barry Holland, the Marky Holland, Gary Kennedy was such a good footballer. But unfortunately for us, Linfield were just that little bit better than us.
Did you find that was your most enjoyable period of football?
Yeah, because you're playing and you're playing well and you're enjoying it as part of this little environment that you found yourself in that just you seem to get. I didn't care about the religious aspect. That didn't bother me in any shape or form. Maybe it was naive of me at the time. I was still mid-20s, early 20s. I just loved the environment in terms of what it was like and how everybody got on, and we had one common goal, and that was, as I say, to look after each other on the football pitch and go and try and win football matches.
Did you get any backlash?
Yeah, I got bits and pieces over the years, but that's expected, isn't it? So it didn't bother me.
Yeah.
It didn't fizz on me, to be honest.
Was it a proud moment to sign for Cliftonville knowing that your dad had played there?
It had an impact. It had an impact, and I spoke to him about it, and he told me how much. It was a lot different for him because he had done it in the 80s.
Yeah,
it wasn't as straightforward then.
Yeah,
so, but he had there was great people at that football club that I would have done anything for, and hopefully every time that it did wear, it goes without saying, any time that I wore any jersey, I always felt that I gave everything that I had. at Cliftonville, maybe it was just a wee bit more appreciated because I was probably playing better. You know, I didn't try any more, and I wouldn't have tried any more for anyone. I always had that about me, that I had standards to do as well as I possibly could, but it was maybe just a better footballer at Cliftonville.
You scored a couple of goals for Kimball.
I did 1 or 2, yeah.
By my calculations, you've 18, which is a serious return for a centre.
Yeah.
One of those, actually 2 of them we'll talk about. You score in the first live Sky Sports event.
Yeah, and Jerry Armstrong done me up like a kipper, by the way.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a good night actually. The Sky game against Linfield, and I'd made a massive mistake. If you watch it back, like, one of the parts of our preparation was Linfield's free kicks around the box, and we knew, and I was designated obviously to pick Spike Ferguson up. So, and Macker's always rolled that one in at some stage, and he had rolled it in, and Spike went as if he was going to the back post. And if you look on the footage, I think I've watched it a couple of times and absolutely hammered myself. I'm pointing or telling someone else or trying to organise something, and they've went and done that. They played it down the side, and Spike scores. So to get the equaliser was a massive relief because I knew I'd let the team down. And it was off a deep set piece. I think it was Janty put the cross in. It came back off the post. Big Tino Almanis, I think it maybe tipped it onto the post, and it came back across. And genuinely, Jerry says, "Oh, it's came off his knee and went in the net." But genuinely, it did come back to me, and the only way I was going to knock it in was with my knee. So it did genuinely finish it with my knee.
Just give it a wee
It did.
nudge.
Yeah, if you watch it back, and it always grates me.
Commentators kill you, don't they? Like, just give it.
Me. Yeah.
Just give it.
You
scored for Northern Ireland.
Do you remember Conor McLaughlin? He looked like a match. He had the red hair.
Yes, yeah.
Wrote the things. And I hammered about it for years. Talking about running Skinnell. So I've hit this lovely little crisp 40 yards straight past under Ronan, and Ronan got took down for a penalty. And Conor wrote the next day, Skinnell won a penalty from an innocuous punt from McAlinden. It was actually Ronan brought it up to him. Like, have we seen what he's writing about you? So if I see Conor even still, I always remind him of that. But yeah, so it was, sorry, I'm just going off on a complete tangent, but yeah, it was good times.
The other one I want to talk to you about is...
And loads of goals. Sorry, you're talking about the goals.
Loads of goals. This is the good bit. I want to get people to know here.
So yeah,
this
scored in the first
ever
Sky game.
You scored in the first ever Sky game, and then what I want to talk to you about is why were you hitting free kicks?
I told you earlier on, I just loved scoring goals.
You centre half shooting, hit free kicks.
That's enough.
And yes, you scored it. It was unbelievable, right?
Cross.
But I couldn't believe it was you, and I was actually like zooming in, like, there's no way.
Yeah, I was always harping on the boys to let me hit penalties and free kicks.
Right.
Even though with massively talented individuals, like, I mean, whenever I first joined, Sean Ferrars was there.
Right.
Like, me, Ferrarsy, and Georgie McMullen should never be standing for free kicks together. Like, I what I was doing there, I have no idea. But I hit the odd one, and luckily the odd one went down.
You hit this one from a good 35.
That was against the Cruise, wasn't it?
Good 35 yards out. That Crusaders, wasn't it?
Down at Crusaders on a massively
straight into the top. Genuinely, I was like, there's no way this is McAlinden. But here for a
I was
video.
surprised too.
Yeah. Just Alan Shearer on the way back.
I think he gave it like,
back.
What's all the fuss about?
Let me hit them. What are you on about, Ferrarsy?
I think everyone was surprised, to be honest. I think Ferrarsy had left at that stage. Funny story about John. I think we qualified for the semi-final Irish Cup. We're playing against Dungannon, and we might have been playing Limavady down there or something, but Eddie decided would stay or would go on a bus run, and would go and have a few beers and wherever down there, and then head back. I can't remember if we stayed over or not, but anyway, we're in this bar somewhere. Can't even remember where it was, but Ferrarsy, I think he was back and forward because he's an amazing footballer, but bonkers.
Mental, I've heard.
Off the scale, nuts.
But ridiculously talented, I've heard.
Ridiculous. Yeah. And he showed up with a paper under his arm and a pair of bedroom slippers in the nightclub. Yeah, he told his missus that he was going for a pint of milk. And Sean showed up in his bedroom, and we were like, "Why did you not change your shoes?" Should have knew I was up to something if I hadn't changed my shoes. So we're standing in this bar nightclub place, and Farsi showed up in his bedroom slippers.
Right. I've heard so much because I spent a lot of time with Emmett. Emmett played with me at Ballymena, who's a great fella.
Yeah.
Done part of my license and stuff with Emmett, and the stories of his brother were
bonkers. But what a
incredible. Heard he was so talented.
Brilliant. Whenever I first went there, he said to me, "I'll get you 15 goals a season." And I think my first goal for Cliftonville was against Korean, or one of my first goals, and it was off a Friersey corner.
Right.
And he kept shouting to me, "I told you. And his delivery was really different class. What a footballer, but absolute lunatic.
You move on then to Distillery.
Yeah.
What's that like going to the dogs? Sorry for the pun there.
Oh, I've seen you wrote that in your notes. So we'd obviously been really successful at Cliftonville. Part of that was winning in Europe. And first ever Cliftonville team to win in Europe. So it had that massive high. And then I'd done my knee. So Cliftonville were playing, so sorry to go back a wee bit, but it sort of rolls into it. Cliftonville had, something was happening to the ground. I don't know, I can't remember if the cage was getting knocked down or something or other, or the new stand was getting built. We had to play at DC. And I went for a header at DC one time, and it came down and my knee just gave way from under me. So anyway, I got carried off, went, and I remembered, knew something was wrong, obviously, because it was down, but I'd trying to drive, and I was putting a clutch in. But certain stages when I was putting a clutch in, something was like coming out from my knee.
Right.
And I was having to push it back in again. And like put it, so it transpired that it was a bit of a kneecap. So I went in, got that operated on, came back, and it was still really sore. So I have a little hole in my kneecap from them like smoothing it over on the inside. And they told me at that stage, like, that's not a normal injury. You will struggle slightly. And I remember asking Brazzy when I came back the pre-season, watch me if I'm running or dragging my leg or whatever, let me know, because I'm really mentally trying to work on it. So anyway, fast forward, we got to the Irish Cup final, and I'd only really been coming back from injury, and the Glens had won the league. They beat us 4-0 at the Oval, I think, and Eddie had thrown a load of the players in that hadn't been playing, and we got beat. Didn't have a great game, and we're in the Irish Cup final against Crusaders. And the one thing I'd always wanted to do was win the Irish Cup, because my dad, when he played, didn't win anything. Yeah. And I'd won a county under city, which was good, blah blah blah, whatever. But my mum had always said I'd love one of those medals, you know, the distinctive Irish Cup medal. So in my head, that's all I ever wanted to do was try and get one of them. And Eddie had left me the squad. We're training at Greenmount, and he was pulling players to the side during the like little 8v8 or so, whatever it was at the end. And I didn't even want to listen to him. I knew it was coming. And I remember getting home and like breaking my heart that I wasn't going to be in the squad. And after that, then I got the complete hump up. I was done. That was me and him finished. And I can't remember if I put a transfer request in, or I just went to Gerald Lawler and said, look, me and him's done. Because we'd had run-ins in the past. Because it was coming up to the end of my contract at one stage, and I'd actually scored the winner. I'm going back again, by the way.
You're right, you should do it.
Talking about Eddie, but so me and him had a topsy-turvy bit of a relationship. But probably the strangest moment was we played Armagh at home, and I had scored a North free kick. Right? And we win 1-0, but we're awful. It's Solitude. Right. And Eddie had been on at Orange Smith or something, I think it was, and I had like shouted something back to him during the game. And when I went in, he used to give you the wee brown envelope. Remember them? For travelling?
For travelling expenses? No, it wasn't wages.
Yeah, it was travelling expenses. No. And it said like minus some percent as per manager. So you remember the old dugout or the old change rooms at the Reds?
Yeah.
It's like that, and then the manager's room had this little tunnel down to it. I was like, just win the match 1-0, and I've been fined. I'm like, what's that all about? And he was like, don't speak to me on the touchline ever again. And I looked at my wages and just threw them down at him, and marched up. That's me finished. Marched up the thing. I said to my dad, let's go. And he goes, what's happened? I'm like, forget about it, let's go. Jim Boyce trying to stop me on the way out. I'm like, Jim, that's me done, blah, blah, blah. So the next morning, Jared Lawler rings me to ask me how to calm down. I'm like, no, I'm done, I'm finished. This was going back halfway through the season. And but my contract was up. And Jared said, look, calm down, come and meet us. I'm accused again. Come and meet us. So I'm like, right, I'll come and meet you. Let's see if we can sort this out. So me and Eddie's like miles apart at this stage. Like I'm gunning for him, wanting to take his head off his shoulders.
Mm-hmm.
And Jared rang me back about 15 minutes later and he said, here. I said, what is it? What is it now? And he goes, Eddie wants to know if you want him to pick you up or if you want him to pick you up and go out. He was serious as well. He wasn't even joking. So I was like, no, I'll get there myself. But anyway, fast forward again. Sorry to the Irish Cup final, and he had left me out, and I was like, mentally, my head had gone then. And I'd asked her to leave, and Jimmy Brown was back at the Whites. He had been my Whites manager, or he had took over at the Whites, sorry. And they came in, and he said, look, we'll take him. So I don't know what happened anyway, but I was allowed to leave, and I went to the Whites, but turned into an absolute nightmare.
Talk about that nightmare.
Well, the Whites had a few quid to spend, and they were spending it, and
You took most of it?
I did not. It transpired that I thought I was being decently paid,
Right.
and then the main sponsor or something pulled out, and there was a big fallout within the club, so they couldn't pay any wages then. Jimmy got the sack, or left, or whatever it was. Tommy Wright then came in, who had known briefly from Kenny brought him as goalkeeper at Ballymena, and he was towards the end, so it sort of knew him, but I was really struggling with my knee. And even to be fair, even at the end of Cliftonville, I was really struggling to get fit. It was hurting me more and more, and I just wasn't the same. But anyway, so I signed for Jimmy and played a few games, but I was out of shape, and I just couldn't get fit enough to even get fit, if that makes sense.
How much slower were you?
Oh,
Like a snake.
couldn't have been any slower. But the first 5 yards are in your head, and I could always read it. So I always done all right that way. So yeah, and I just the Whites, and so they went into a CVA, which meant they weren't paying the players, or they were paying them like 20%, or you could leave. Mm-hmm. And Tommy came back to us and said, like, you have all the chance, you can't go, we can't hold you, blah blah blah. So I was like, no, I'll stay, because I was hurt, and I could never get a run of it, and yeah, and it just sort of fizzled out. But the Whites were a decent side then. Like, even though they were struggling, Tommy sort of rallied the troops a little bit. Then Ferguson had been brought in by Jimmy Brown, and there was a few good players. Peter McCann. When the CVA report came out, this is how I knew I wasn't getting very much money in the end. So the CVA report's a legal document that tells you what everyone's on and the duration of their contract. So I'm reading down the numbers going, Jimmy Brown's done me up like a kipper here. Everyone's getting 2 fortunes, and I'm like, oh, no, it was okay.
You were thinking, I'm all right here, you know what?
I'm all right. And then I started to read them, and I was like, wow, no wonder.
Jimmy really didn't.
So that, unfortunately for them, they had to sell the ground. Through wasn't the player, or whatever happened off the field, it just happened, and yeah, but then Tommy went on to win. I think they went on to win the County Antrim Shield. Cushley was there, Spigot was still there, so they had a little bit of success after I'd left, which was always good to see, because I always had a decent connection. A big mate of mine, Ram McMinn, his dad was probably the best and most legendary player at the Whites, Bertie McMinn, who was, in days gone by, was a proper footballer playing in my dad's era. And yeah, I've always had a little bit of a connection and like him for the Whites. That probably came into my thinking whenever
You were
Jimmy asked me to go there. So my dad played for the Whites. So I had a wee bit of a connection, and it just didn't work out because I couldn't get myself fit. And when I got myself fit, I broke down again, and it was never working. I tried and tried, but it just didn't work out.
At this stage, when you're playing full wise, do you know that you're done?
I knew I was really struggling. It didn't matter what I did. And the problem was that whenever I was fit and healthy and training, and I was thin, like at the Reds. But my as most players we didn't have the education, and the boys that would be at clubs now telling you what you should and shouldn't be eating and blah blah blah. Yeah. So the education wasn't the same, and I was just continuing to follow the same diet that I'd always done, but I wasn't playing and I wasn't training properly, and it was just starting to catch up on me, and before you know it, then it's caught up on you. So I was out of shape, and I knew that I was really struggling on my knee, and yeah, I just knew that it wasn't good. Yeah, I left the Whites and went to Carrick and played.
Toilets.
Yeah, I went to Carrick under Stevie Small. Obviously, had known me and a little bit, even though I didn't really know him that much. And they were trying to get promoted as a club, and I became available then, and he'd came after me because he thought that they were close, and myself and maybe one or two more would get them over the line and get promoted, which happened. But a massive benefit of that would have been he signed Heats as well. Right. So Paul Heatley signed in the same summer. I had signed, we'd played a couple of games, and we were a decent, hard-working team. Big Ant O'Lagan was incredible as a centre forward that year. Big Michael McLean played beside me, was good. Liam Hogan, who you'll know. So we were decent, but then he tried to get Heatley, and then he was playing for Brantwood. He fell out of love with football.
Right.
He played for Brantwood, and we drew them in the Steel Cup, and we beat them 4-3, and Heatley was incredible. He scored 3, I think he scored 3 that day. And after the match, Stevie just got him in a headlock and signed him.
Such a good footballer.
What a footballer. So that year was pretty much, we fought the fight, and Heatley won us the matches, really. Yeah. And we chipped in with goals from set pieces. But dropping down the level to the championship again, even though my knee was still bothering me, I knew
it was easier for you.
I wouldn't give the disrespect to say that, but I knew I could manage better. I knew I could use my experience to get people around me, and even though I was still only 27, 28, I don't know, I can't remember, but yeah, I knew dropping down the level I would be able to get by. And I still wasn't in brilliant physical shape, but I played the level more than anything, and we were successful. As I say, we fought the fight, and Stevie knew what he was doing by bringing me in there, because we had big personalities. And you hear this old thing, and I hate using the term, but me and Ant O'Lagan and Tony Anderson would have ran the dressing room for Stevie. So looking back as a manager, it must have been a good thing. And there would have been times, I say that because there would have been times like when we've maybe struggled at half time, and I'd have said to him on the way in, like, we'll deal with the first 5 minutes. And that as a manager's gold. So he knew what he was doing. It was brilliant management bringing us all in.
Yeah.
And getting that group together. And he knew on Heatley was the gold dust.
Yeah.
And it was like, I enjoy watching ice hockey, so NHL. And if you go after the star player in the NHL, then the rest of the team just like hammer you. That's the way it was with Heats. Like, we had all 6'2" players and then Heats, but if anyone went near them, like, we just went after people, rightly or wrongly. But that's the way it was in the championship. It was dog eat dog, and Heatley was just, as I say, the magic dust.
Season ticket holder at the Giants this one.
I am, yeah.
Is that a good transition after football?
It's brilliant because I don't know what's going on. And it's really enjoyable, so I enjoy it.
Subway guns and all?
Aye, the gimmick.
It's one thing that people keep saying to me, you should go to Giants game, there's a Subway gun, and I'm like,
that's not why you go.
This is why I kind of do want to go though.
Yeah. Let me know, I'll bring you.
Well, thanks for that invite.
So it was, Carrick was good. So, and ultimately, so weirdly, we're in the Intermediate Cup final. Heats was hurt towards the end of the year. And Stevie put him on the bench in the Intermediate Cup final. We were going for the league with Ballymena at the time. The previous week we went to Ballymena and beat them 3-0, so it was a huge result. I'll not tell you who scored 2 out of the 3 goals, but with a huge result down there. And we went in the Intermediate Cup final on a Tuesday against the Welders, who absolutely battered us, by the way.
Okay.
Andy Dixon hit the crossbar and it bounced down. It was definitely in by about 3 yards, bounced out again. And he brought heats on with like one leg with 10 minutes to go, and he scores nearly straight away. And Ballymena were playing that night and drew or lost, which meant it was weird. Within like a minute, Heats had scored and the other team had scored, and the 2 final whistles went. So within like a minute, we'd won the league on the Intermediate Cup and CLS. So yeah, that's how our season finished really. Yeah, and then so we'd obviously got promoted in the back end of the Premier League.
Did you feel like you were able to cope with the Premiership again, or was this another thing where you?
It was going to be difficult, but I gave myself a really good summer to give myself the best opportunity. You'll know, your ego sort of says, you can go at this again. And that's where I was. I wanted to be a Premier League player. So yeah, I gave myself every opportunity to try and lead Carrick into the Premier League.